Donald Trump has been on a tear this week. The man is literally the Oprah of executive order. It's just been executive order after executive order. It's been you get an order, you get an order, and you get an order. It's been a busy week for President Trump. He has declassified all assassination files related to JFK, RFK, and Martin Luther King. He's brought TikTok back and he's actively trying to get the social media sites in American hands. He has pardoned hundreds of people involved in the J6 attack on the Capitol. He's actively trying to arrest and deport illegal immigrants. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. Trump is definitely a man of his word, and maybe that is why he's a man to be taken very seriously, despite his very wild tendencies. But I will say this. While the illegal immigrant deportation is not particularly good to see on a humanitarian level, you've got to admit that the illegal immigrant situation, unfortunately, puts a strain on resources and on services. Hence, the reason why a lot of people have turned against illegal immigrants so much in recent times, especially with people facing an affordability crisis and all sorts, right? Yes, a lot of these illegal immigrants are fleeing really tough situations, and there should be a path to help a controlled number of immigrants seeking regularization. However, Western countries cannot afford to take everyone. That's just the reality of it. If you're not living in a fantasy land, you know that the Western countries cannot afford to take every illegal immigrant. I actually had this debate with a person on my podcast a while ago. Why don't you guys listen to that and make up your own mind? And not expect the government to actively encourage illegal immigration. I'm not saying you're wrong. People are not supposed to die because they're trying to move from one place to the other. What is the alternative to combating illegal immigration?
The greatest reasons for migration through the Sahara are conflict, like literally wars break out in their homes, drought and famine, there is literally nothing left to eat, or environmental disasters. You still think that people should go through regular avenues when they're literally fleeing a war zone, right? Like you're talking about a particular middle class and upper middle class avenues for migration, but those aren't the people who are going through the desert. People don't undertake that journey if it's an option. It is horrific. That's not how you choose to get somewhere else. That is what you resort to because you have nowhere else to go.
So, where do you land on this debate? Why don't you let me know in the chat? And if you'd like to watch the entire episode of what I just played you, I'll link it at the end of this video. Anyways, so let's move on. Literally, on his second day in office, Trump is at the National Prayer Service, and the Episcopal bishop preaching at that service is a certain Marianne Edgar Budd. Let me tell you, as a person that was raised Catholic, I knew right away she wasn't a Catholic bishop. For some reason, people thought she was Catholic. And I was like, number one, she's a she. You would never have that. It would never happen in the Catholic Church. They still don't ordain women in the Catholic Church as priests, I don't think. If you know the Catholic Church, you know that we like to keep things strictly BC. I mean, before Christ. We're not very modern in our practices. Anyways, the second dead giveaway was the fact that her middle name is Edgar. It's like, there are so many clues, guys. Anyways, I'm joking, mostly. Here's a video of what the bishop said that appeared to really piss off President Trump during the National Prayer Service.
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. And as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay taxes and are good neighbors. They are faithful members of our churches and mosques. synagogues, wadara, and temples. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here. Our God teaches us that we are to be merciful to the stranger, for we were all once strangers in this land.
So after the service, Trump absolutely lit her up on True Social. Never mind the interview he did after the service. I will say this, in this particular event of the National Prayer Service, I don't think the bishop did anything wrong. She is a Christian bishop and she was preaching tolerance. I mean, they go hand in hand, right? Trump has repeated on several occasions that a large number of illegal immigrants that have killed people, a large number of murderers that is, currently live free in the U.S. Well, it's kind of true. And this was what I found in my fact checking. It's kind of true. And this, I think, is the danger of Trump's rhetoric sometimes, the partial truths, right? Yes, it is true that there were 13,000 non-citizens convicted of murder living in the United States who were not being detained by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This information is as of July 21st, 2024. But think about it. There are an estimated 13 million illegal immigrants in the U.S. That's a number you'd have heard a lot in the last few months, right? Now, these 13,000 murderers are basically 0.1% of illegal immigrants. So the fact still remains that the majority of those illegal immigrants are not murderers. We could do the same math with the people Trump claims came from mental institutions and such. But as I said off the top, from the perspective of resources, I see why it is important to tackle illegal immigration. But you've also got to understand that it is really the duty of the church to stand up for these people. Many of these people are fleeing hardships we can only imagine. Many are hoping for a better life. Many are running from certain death back home. Again, any Christian would have some compassion for a lot of these people. That said, this bishop and Trump have some history. Maybe that's partly responsible for Trump's response here. She has said some things against Trump in the past. Here's a video of that from 2020.
Why did you want to come out here and send
their message? It is a message of a call for justice, for swift justice for George Floyd, for systemic justice for all brown and black people who have been under the knee of this country in ways that we have witnessed time and again. This is wrong. And this rising up, this spontaneous uprising of people, mostly half my age or younger, they're the ones we should be listening to.
And they're angry at the president.
They're so angry.
They're angry at the president. So what is your message to President Trump today?
Well, I've given up speaking to President Trump. We need to replace President Trump. We need leadership that will lead us in the ways that this country deserves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At least she's consistent, eh? She marched in protest for George Floyd and other murdered black people in 2020. Some people might say, why should the church be getting involved in politics? But you got to understand what Christianity really is about. So I would say she's done nothing wrong here. But actually, before we leave the issue of illegal immigrants, obviously these deportation flights started this week. Did you guys see that Mexico refused to take one of the deportation flights? Mexico was just like, nah. Like, keep them over there. I guess slapping tariffs and making threats don't do the trick, eh? Well, it does look like the flights are now going as planned, though. They just needed a little bit of sorting, it seems. Anyways, let's move on. The other thing Trump did this week, he spoke at the World Economic Forum. During his speech, he played most of his usual hits. This is going to be the golden age of America. The Biden administration ruined America. America is open for business. I'm putting tariffs on every single one of you motherfuckers. Unless, of course, you come and invest in the United States. You know, only his greatest hits. In that speech at the World Economic Forum, he said something I don't think anybody caught. Literally zero coverage in the news. So listen to this.
I'm also going to ask Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bring down the cost of oil. You got to bring it down, which, frankly, I'm surprised they didn't do before the election. That didn't show a lot of love by them not doing it. I was a little surprised by that. If the price came down, the Russia-Ukraine war would end immediately. Right now, the price is high enough that war will continue. You got to bring down the oil price. You got to end that war. They should have done it long ago. They're very responsible, actually, to a certain extent, for what's taking place. Millions of lives are being lost.
In case that wasn't clear, Donald Trump actually said with a straight face that Saudi Arabia and the OPEC countries should drop the price of oil so that the war between Russia and Ukraine would end. In fact, he said OPEC's lack of desire to drop the oil prices is partly the reason that lives are being lost in Ukraine. All right, so let's break this down. So explain to me again why Saudi Arabia or any of the OPEC countries would sacrifice billions of dollars in revenue to end the war in Ukraine. Like, explain that to me. Think about what I'm telling you here. So I'll give you an example. So between August of 2023 and August 2024, Saudi Arabia lost about $3 billion due to just supply chain constraints in trying to sell their oil, right? I know it's hard to put in context how much money that is with these Saudi princes, but I'll say that's a lot of money to anybody. But again, what is in this for the OPEC countries? Why should they drop their oil prices in order to sort out the war between Russia and Ukraine? What is in this for them? Obviously, Trump's idea here is to exert economic pressure on Russia by hitting them in the pockets, right? Russia, as you might know, is very dependent on oil exports. But I will say this, while the idea of asking the OPEC countries to drop oil prices and by extension lose money is a bit weird, it is probably far less ridiculous than the Biden government continuing to supply ammunition to Ukraine and basically using them in a proxy war with Russia. Honestly, I think Russia will probably agree to end the war right now. They've taken something like 20% of Ukrainian territory during this war. Part of the reason it has been so difficult to come to a settlement is because Ukraine wants all that territory returned before an end to the war. Now, I don't know that they'll have a choice in the end. Without the support of the United States, what do you do, right? Like, maybe Europe can chip in? Anyways, outside the World Economic Forum, Trump also made his customary pitch to make Canada the 51st state. The answer is still no. But can you imagine he said Canada would get better healthcare as the 51st state? Like, bro, what? I bet Luigi Mangione disagrees. Like, nah. We're proud of the fact that in this country, you can get the best care possible irrespective of your means. For free, no less, right? This is part of the Canada promise. So, no, we wouldn't be better with American healthcare. We're good. Also, can you believe that Trump said Canada has been difficult to deal with on trade? Like, how? We give you our oil at a discount. We buy more goods from you than you buy from us. Like, the US actually has a trade surplus with Canada if you remove oil and gas. He's literally gaslighting Canada right now. He's been talking about this $250 billion deficit, which simply doesn't exist. Like, even with oil and gas, Canada's trade surplus with the United States was around $30 billion in 2023. I've discussed a lot more about the whole illegal immigration and fentanyl issue in other videos, so let's not get into that too much in this video. I will say this. I think we're beginning to see with Saudi Arabia and also with Canada, I think we're starting to see Trump's negotiating tactic. He is basically conducting business as the president of America in the manner of a mafia boss, essentially. He's demanding respect out of the countries of the world while blatantly disrespecting countries like Canada, for example. Like, calling Canada the 51st state is not the peak of diplomacy. It's insulting. Anyways, he's asking Saudi Arabia to give up money while pulling funding from Ukraine. It's interesting, isn't it? The last thing I thought I'd mention in this video was Trump's announcement of the $100 billion investments in AI data centers. I honestly thought that was brilliant, to be fair. You see, I can be fair. I can be fair. I'm not criticizing him on everything. The US does need to take its place on the cutting edge of AI innovation. It is a strategic no-brainer, really. And why wouldn't you do it? I also know that these AI data centers consume a lot of energy. A single ChatGPT prompt consumes about 2.5 watt hours of energy. Now, that is enough to power a 9-watt LED bulb for about 17 minutes. I know. I just geeked out on you just there. My point here is that those data centers are going to need a lot of power. Honestly, I've been looking at companies that make small modular reactors as part of my own personal investment thesis. I think that will be interesting in the next few decades. Don't take my word for it. Believe it or not, I'm actually a chemist. I'm not a political scientist or an investment banker. I just know a little bit about a lot of things. And I'd like to talk to you guys about it, you good people. So why don't you subscribe and stay in the conversation? I'll see you next time. Take care, guys.